All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of the Because Football podcast. This is your host, Coach Andrew, and today we have a very special guest. We have Coach Steve Darby. Coach Darby has coached at the national team level for countries such as Laos and Vietnam and Thailand. He was a coaching instructor for Australia and has had so many experiences and impacted the game all over the world. So we're very excited to chat with him today. So, Steve, first of all, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Andrew, and excuse the Kenny Rogers look-alike. I had a minor operation on my ear, and I wasn't allowed to shave, so that's why I do look like this.
I think, I would say you got to keep it going, Steve. I like the look, and I think you got to own it there. So, but yeah, so first thing, where are you calling in from today?
Well, I'm back literally home in Liverpool, in England. That's where obviously I was born. And it's like a circle, really. I've come back. Hopefully one day I will return to Asia. My daughter's going to university soon, so that should allow me a bit more freedom.
Excellent. And so Liverpool, the big question, red or blue, of course.
Born a red, and like they say here, you can change your religion, you can change your wife, but you can't change your football club. But I do respect and admire Everton. In fact, I worked for them for a year, and they're a fantastic club. They do a lot more than Liverpool do off the pitch. On the pitch, maybe a different matter at the moment, but they've had some great sides over the years.
Yeah, and I think, as an American, someone who's just seeing the game from afar, it's such a unique situation in Liverpool where you've got Goodison Park, where Everton play, and then obviously Anfield, the home of Liverpool, just a stone's throw away from each other, right? So in most places that's not the case, where such heated rivals are so close. So when you walk through Liverpool, is it like, all right, this side is the red side and you see all the Liverpool flags and banners and this is the blue, or is it kind of family by family, neighborhood by neighborhood? How is it kind of split up and divided?
No, it's everywhere. I was born in Anfield, probably about 200 meters from Anfield Stadium, probably about 400 meters from Goodison Park. But my dad was an Evertonian. Other family members are Reds. All over Liverpool, it's the same. The families are mixed up. There's no sort of places that exist for Everton or Liverpool. And it's usually 99% of the time friendly. You used to go to games where the red would sit next to a blue, and when terrible things happen like Heysel or the Reece Jones killing, or obviously Hillsborough, the two sets of fans do mix together well, and there's no real problems at all in that area. They support each other.
Sounds like a unique situation, and obviously a healthy rivalry, but in a sense a footballing brotherhood. So for you growing up, obviously in such a hotbed of football, what are some of your earliest experiences of the game?
Well, I sometimes think if you're born in South America, you're a Catholic. If you're born in like Perlis, Malaysia, you're going to be a Muslim. I was born in Anfield, so I had to be a football lunatic. And that's where it was literally, you go to school. I went to Anfield Road Primary, where you played football 3 times a day, two breaks and lunchtime. You come home, have a quick tea, out you went into the street, played football in the streets until it was pitch black. Luckily, there wasn't too many cars in those days. So it was non-stop football. And maybe a case of there wasn't much else. There wasn't much TV in those days. There wasn't video games. But it was just football, and maybe 6 or 7 weeks of cricket in summer.
Well, I can't imagine that you're probably playing football more than you're taking your meals and things like that.
Yeah.
Five matches a day, and I've heard that a lot. From players of your generation, right? And it's obviously different for mine. And nowadays too, we have different competition. You mentioned television and other entertainment, and just the fact that it's not as open and accessible for kids to play on the street. When you had that experience as a kid, is that the type of experience you saw in other parts of the world where you would coach, or was it much more organized and kind of structured for youth football?
Well, it varied. I mean, people say to me, what's it like coaching in Asia? Well, Asia is absolutely enormous.
Massive.
And it's also massively different. What happens in Japan does not happen in Laos, does not happen in Bangladesh, does not happen in Iran. So you cannot say what happens in one country is replicated somewhere else. You have the highly structured Japanese model, which is working. You have the ad hoc structure in other countries, we'll say in the South American area, that is working as well. So I don't think there's one rule that works. I think the only thing is the reality is you play as much football as you can. And I don't mean coach, if I say this as a coach, but I was hardly ever coached, and I'm sure I would have been a better player if I was coached. But you have to have the passion just to play. That's where the greatest players come from, the streets, your Maradonas, etc. Who they literally are born on the streets, where you learn to look after yourself, where you learn to use your arms, where you learn to survive. But if you can get the best of that and add with the best of coaching, then you're going to get some great players.
That's a great point. I love how you put it, that regardless of the model, just playing as much as you can, right? And obviously, every country and culture has to have a different approach because they're dealing with a different set of circumstances and conditions, right? How have you seen the game change? Let's use England, obviously, knowing that very well is your home country. How has it changed from a youth development angle from your days of just playing in the street, not very structured, to now, the current day?
Well, when I was about 16, I was signed on to an English football club. I was there for about a year. I can honestly say I wasn't really coached in the sense of what I know coaching was. I played a lot of 11v11. I did an awful lot of running pre-season. I was told such pieces of wisdom as you should have saved that. I was a goalkeeper, which doesn't really help because you do know it. You should have saved it, don't you? And you also survived kicks because you had to learn to be tough. You were also taught if you got kicked, never show pain. Lots of things like this. It was very sort of survival of the fittest that got through. I was told, you've got a chance to go on to university, take it. And they were right. Let's make no bones about it. I didn't have the ability to go on to be a star. So they gave me the right advice. Later, in about the year 2001, I returned to work at an academy, Sheffield Wednesday, and it was a lot better, a lot more structured. We cared about the kids as people as well. They were coming in at the age of 6 and 7, and we're looking after them all the way through to 16. But probably the most heartbreaking job I've had in football is to tell a 16-year-old he's not going to get a pro contract. And even though I'd say, look, I do know how you feel because it happened to me, then the reality is it still hurts. It still hurts them. It hurts their family. And in some cases now it's an economic disaster because some of these families are thinking their child is going to be a Premier League star and look after the whole family. And the percentage that actually kick on to be Premier League players is minuscule. You're looking at 0.0 something percent. It's a brutal profession. One, if you make it, it's the best profession in the world. But my goodness, it's so hard to make it.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. I mean, the type of players I'm generally working with, I can't say I've necessarily seen a kid who's like, oh, they can make it even at the top level here in the United States. And I'm sure there's so much talent, right? And I feel like I'm of the opinion that, the younger the kids are, the more potential they have, the right talent, and then things start to change as they go. But for a young player out there who does have that dream, right, of playing at the top level, what can they do to prepare themselves to get there? And obviously everyone has maybe their own individual ceiling, but how can they maximize their potential to the fullest?
Well, the first thing is keep the dream. That's the first thing. And keep on trying no matter what happens. For example, I rejected a young player at 15 because he was too small from Sheffield Wednesday Academy. He went on to play for England. So you do make mistakes. I'm not proud of that mistake. So it does happen. And as I've heard of other cases of other kids being rejected, often usually through the word height. And yet the craziest thing is the two best players I've ever seen in my life, Maradona and Messi, are both about 5'4", 5'5". Yeah. So, height is irrelevant in a sense, but it seems to be a factor in youth soccer. I don't know if it is in the USA, but certainly it was for a time in England. But the main thing is you often can't improve your ability. It's possibly innate. You can practice more, but there's one thing you can improve, and that's being as fit as you can. So you try and put all the other things in place. Eat properly. Don't smoke. Don't drink. And which is quite common thing in England. I don't know if it's in the USA, but in England, live a better lifestyle. Train every day. So you can be as fit as you can be. You can't, your maximum, your talent, I think it tends to be either genetic or you've reached a certain potential, but your fitness, you can really push on it every day. Hit the gym, do weights, you'll run every day, and lead, again, a good lifestyle. I don't mean be a monk, you be a normal kid, go out with your mates occasionally, have the odd pizza, but think about it. If you're going to make the top, do everything you can that helps you make the top. Everything you have in life is your decision. You make the decision. Is this what I'm going to do tonight? Is it going to make me a better footballer or not? If it is, do it. If it's not, think, okay, then I've got to make a decision. Do I want to be a footballer or do I want to go out and do that? You've got to make decisions, and you've got to make them yourself. You can't rely on your mum and dad or somebody else. You've got to start to be internally driven. You can have guidance, and that's where coaches, I think, are very important. Good coaches, good role models, they can give you the guidance to say, yes, don't do that. Do that instead. And, you do hear some excellent coaches at youth level. And I honestly believe coaching at youth level is a massively different beast to coaching at professional level.
I agree. From what I know. Yeah.
Coaching at professional level is about one thing: winning. Nothing else. Forget anything else people talk about. Forget this word philosophy and projects. It's about winning every week. Coaching a youth player, different. The result may not be that important. If you can see that young player is getting better and has got a pathway to the top, then that's a different philosophy, different method of coaching.
Yeah, it's something I personally have not seen that experience that professional coaching level, but it's something I've heard so consistently, and I see, and it makes sense, right? As coaches of youth players, we have a much different role, develop them as a person, beyond just being a player too. And I think that's part of our role. Like you said, the percentage that make it is so small. And what I really liked when I asked you that previous question, Coach, is that you said you got to keep the dream, right? That was number one. So I'm curious if we turn the magnifying glass back on your life and your journey, what led you to leave the UK and everything you knew to then go to, I believe it was Australia initially, and be involved in the game there?
Well, in football, I often tell people there's a lot of luck that goes on. There's an awful lot of right time, right place. And there's also an element of who you know. But you develop who you know as you go through your career. You build your contacts. But in terms of luck, I was kicked out by a pro club, quite rightly. Went to university and did a phys ed degree. And then I started teaching as a PE teacher. Then a little bit of luck came in. A college lecturer gave me a phone call and said, do I want to go and work full-time coaching in Bahrain? And I didn't even ask about the money. I was just said, yes, end of story. Because I didn't even know where Bahrain was, to be honest.
I was going to say, could you find it on the map, Coach?
Yeah, so I just went. It turned out to be 6 times my teaching salary as well, which helped. But the reality was I wanted to be full-time in football. I wanted to wake up every morning and think, this is my job, I'm going to work. And the person that influenced me in the most was Bill Shankly, because he just seemed to have like this disciple view about him. Everything he said, you hung on to. And I was very lucky. Just before I went to Bahrain, I went to Melwood, where Liverpool used to train. And you're allowed to go in those days. You used to watch the training. I got there early, and there was Bill Shankly, or Shanks, running around Melwood. He just retired. He retired quite early, actually, about 61, 62. So he was still running around. And I asked him, because Mr. Shankly, you had to have respect. Mr. Shankly, can you help me? I'm going to go abroad and work, my first full-time job. And he just talked. And it wasn't a conversation. It was a monologue, because I just sat there open-eyed. I only wish there'd been the phones we had now. I'd have recorded it, taken a selfie.
Beautiful.
Sadly, in those days, the mobile phone was the big red box at the bottom of my street. So it was, and that's basically how I started. And then from then on, it's like being a bit lucky sometimes. I went to Bahrain. I worked with the national team there, worked with the club. And then I came back and I did my English licenses. I did what they call the English full badge, the full license. And again, someone was there, came from Australia, and they saw me play on the course. And they said, "Do you want to be a player coach in Tasmania?" I said, "Yeah," because basically I'd just been left Bahrain. I wanted a job. So I went to Tasmania, and that's when I went there for 1 year as a player coach and ended up staying 17 years doing various jobs as I went through the system in there. Tasmania was a wonderful place. Met some fantastic people there. But that was the reality of being in the right place at the right time and saying yes and taking a chance and gambling. Sometimes it's going to fail. I've had fantastic jobs. I've had a couple of shockers as well, but I've got to say, well, I took them. I've got to adapt. Maybe it wasn't the job for me. Maybe I wasn't the person for them. So I'm sure they think that as well. So that's, you've got to gamble on yourself sometimes, and you've got to believe in yourself.
Yeah, I think the big thing that sticks out to me from hearing your story there is that courage, right? To gamble, to take a risk. Because I mean, it doesn't get more risky than going someplace you never heard of, where you don't even know where it is, and saying yes, right? And just kind of going for it. And I think with the world we have today, with like so much information, we have everything at our fingertips, right? It creates this like analysis paralysis, right? Where you're like, here's 7 different ways I could go, and it seems like there's a clear path for either. But at the end of the day, you just gotta make that decision.
Well, I got flown to Australia. I landed eventually in a place called Launceston. I got off the plane. It was a small plane because a big plane to Sydney and a small plane to Tasmania, Launceston. And one journalist was there waiting for me, which showed you how important I was. And he was a cameraman as well. And he said, "Can I come down the steps of the plane, carrying a bag, juggling a ball?" I said, "Mate, if I could do that, I'd be at Milan Airport or Barcelona Airport." And then what I did in those days as well, whenever I arrived in a place, I got the local newspaper to try and pick up on what the local news was. So you could immediately talk to people, start to adapt to the culture. I looked at the back page and it said football scores. And it was Collingwood 94, Carlton 86. I thought, what a goalkeeper I'll be here. Because I'd never heard of Australian football. And then I saw it and I ended up falling in love with the game. I think it's a great game. I had a few games of it myself. I actually coached a team for a while because I wanted to see if I could coach other sports. And fantastic game. But that's how sometimes you say you've got to gamble. Now I would have banged on the internet and searched out everything. But this was just going by the seat of my pants and smiling. When you're broke, it doesn't matter how much money you lose. Does it?
Nothing to lose, right? Yeah, nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned, so obviously your journey, your life has been full of so many great situations, right? But you mentioned the few that didn't turn out well, right? Did you ever have those times where you're like, okay, I think I'm in this situation and I don't quite feel like I have the support resources to really succeed here? And what do you kind of do in those situations where it's like, hey, I don't see this necessarily going a great way, but I'm here now and I just got to stick with it.
Yeah, well, you've got to be like independent in a sense, because there are times when you're on your own. You might be stuck in an apartment you don't really like. It's not what they sold you. The committee don't like you. You're getting a massive abuse on social media, and that is a major factor for young coaches now. You've got to learn to handle, I won't say manage, I'll say handle social media, because that can be horrific. I lost one job on Facebook. I opened my Facebook account and I saw the president had sacked me. He didn't tell me, didn't have the courage to tell me. You put it on Facebook. But there was a place I went to in one team in India where half of the committee that appointed me wanted me to be an independent, strong coach to stop some of the corruption that possibly was going on. The other half of the committee didn't want me because basically they wanted their own person in who they could manipulate. And there was like a culture of fear throughout the club. And it was just a daily disaster. Now, I'd been warned by my agents to get paid up front. So I'd been paid 3 months up front. So I'll be honest, I didn't fancy paying them back because I believe in doing the right thing by your contract. So I stuck it out for 3 months, and it was 3 months of hell. I felt I was treated badly. I felt, it was a daily battle, and I didn't enjoy it. The day my 3rd month was up, I went. But I'll be honest, that was a rarity. Most of the jobs I've had have lasted usually about 3 years, and 3 years for the foreigner is quite a long time. That's almost like long service leave. But I might add that to survive 3 years, you've usually got to win something in your first year, because then you get, something. Winning is political power for a coach. Mm-hmm. If you win, you get power. That might be power of a new contract, a better contract. It might mean you get 20 training balls. It might mean you don't do a 14-hour bus trip. You get a 2-hour plane trip. So there's lots of different things you can use it, but winning is so important at the pro level. But yet it can be an awful, tough, lonely life, but the good times to me greatly outweighed the bad times.
Could you tell us about some of those good times, right? And maybe some of those titles and the wins that gave you that more comfortable transportation, nicer lodging, better contract. Tell us about some of those highlights for you.
Again, we talk about luck. I was coaching in Australia, and I'd just got sacked in the National League in Australia. And then I got a phone call from my mate, a fellow called Ron Smith. Did I fancy coming out to Malaysia for 6 weeks? That's all it was, to do 6 games to try and keep this club up from being relegated in the 2nd division to the 3rd division. So I said, yeah, 6 weeks, great. I've never been to Malaysia. I'll go for it. Got there. Very first game I arrived they didn't tell me they were still in the FA Cup, but they hadn't thought of them getting past the FA Cup first round because they thought we'd just get relegated. We won that game that night. The other team hit the post. We went up, scored a breakaway, won 1-0. That's my first bit of luck. Organised the team a little bit better. They turned out to be a good team, a good set of lads. I had a couple of great foreigners, which really is important. The quality of your foreign player dictates often how you'll do. I had good foreign pros. We turned it around and we won every game. We survived relegation, but we went on and won the FA Cup, which had never been done from a 2nd division side before. So we ended up the last game of the season playing in front of about 60,000 people, winning the FA Cup. So I got my new contract. Year after, we won promotion, got to the first top division. Year after that, got sacked. Because they cut my budget by 50%, and we were coming 4th. They felt 4th wasn't good enough. Got sacked. That's welcome to Asia. That happens all over the time. So I could see it coming. I mean, and also you learn as well that sometimes you've got to learn who to upset and who not to upset, because the reality is you're a guest in that country. And as a younger coach, I tended to be more hot-headed, and I would say things which I felt were right, but were possibly the wrong thing to say to that person. And I got some great advice by a local administrator who was my team manager. And he said, look, Steve, you've got to be like bamboo in Asia. And I looked at him and I thought, bamboo, because there's not much bamboo in Anfield. So I said, what do you mean? He said, you've got to learn to bend, not snap. And a snap might be match fixing. Snap might be letting the president pick the team, but bend a little. Just say, okay, maybe you're right. Listen to them, talk to them. And he was dead right. And I learned that over the years. If you listen to people, sometimes they're right and you're wrong. But start to nod, agree, You might nod, agree, then go away and do what you want to do anyway. But and that comes up to it. You in the end, you've got to. I'll say basically, you live on your feet. You don't die on your knees. So you've got to stand by your own thing. If I'm going to get sacked, I'll get sacked for my decisions, not for the president's decisions. I had one president ring me up at 3 a.m, and he's telling me what the team should be for next week. And I said, I guarantee we will lose 3-0. He said, how do you know you're going to lose 3-0? I said, because if you play 12 players like you just said, we will get fined and lose 3-0. And he said, the phone went silent. I said, yes, you just played 4-4-3, not 4-3-3.
It's a good idea, to be fair, just against the rules.
Yeah. I said, who are you going to drop? Oh, I said, because dropping people is a lot harder than picking people. So, I say you've got to be like bamboo. You've got to adapt to the culture, and you've got to remember you're a foreigner. You can't beat the culture. Again, I was in a place called Fiji, which most people outside of Fiji think is wonderful beaches, hotels, which it is. But in the middle of Fiji, there is massive, massive poverty. And I was saying, what can we do to help some of these poorer people? And the administrator says, do you really think that you can do what our government can't do? He said, all you got to do is make the team win. If you win, you'll make the team happy. You'll make the people happy. That's all you can do. And he was right, because you've got to realize it's their culture. You're not going to change it. And you've got to bend to that culture. Good example would be in Malaysia. My star striker, international player, 60 odd times to Malaysia, good professional, good player, rings me up, says, Coach, I can't come training. I said, oh, are you injured? Are you sick? No, I've got to take my mum shopping. I said, what? Get stuffed. Well, it wasn't quite the phrase get stuffed. It was something a bit stronger. And I said, you can't. You're a pro. You've got to come to work. He says, Coach, you can fine me. You could suspend me. But my mum says I've got to go shopping. I've got to, because my dad's not well. I rang my captain up, who was a good lad. I said, this is what's happened. He said, Coach, if my mum told me I'm going shopping, I'm going shopping as well. There's nothing you can do. You can't change that environment. And he was right. The lads didn't mind. They understood. He had no choice. He had to go shopping with his mum because his dad was ill. That was it. He came back the weekend, scored a goal. Everyone's happy. So you adapt to the environment. And there's a famous story by Bobby Robson. He had PSV Eindhoven, and he had Romario in his side, the Brazilian. It was coming training drunk, wasn't coming training, was a shambles. And he decided, he told the players, look, I'm getting rid of Romario. He's a disgrace to the profession, blah, blah, blah. The captain of the team, Eric Gerrits, who was the Belgian captain at the time, come up to Bobby Robson and said, Coach, don't do that. We'll deal with him. Because that man, no matter what he does, he scores goals. And when he scores goals, he wins. When he wins, I get my bonus. I can buy a car. I can look after my kids better. We've got to accept him. And he said, Eric Gerrits was right. The players accepted his role, how Romario was going to be, as long as he did the business on the pitch. And again, that's the reality of football. If a player is doing the best on the park and winning games, you'll close one eye to him. This happens at every level. Shouldn't happen at youth level. That's possibly where examples should be made and standards should be kept and lessons should be learned. But at the top level, you realistically have to say, okay, we're going to win here. That's all that matters.
Yeah, and that's, I was kind of thinking there, the differences, right? Because at the top level, like you said, the only thing that matters is winning, right? Getting the 3 points that leads to better contracts, better lifestyle, better opportunities for yourself and players. But then, of course, the development level is different, right? So could you share some of those stories that you've had in Australia and Asia, where you're working more on a youth level, or of course you were a coach instructor, and how does your approach, how does your behavior have to change when you're in that kind of environment?
Well, I was working for a while as like a the titles change. You call them technical directors now for the Australian system. And we tried to work on a system there. One of the things we tried to get the programs was to stop kids playing 11-a-side on full-size pitches under the age of 10. And we tried to invent a game called Roo Ball, based on the Socceroo, the Kangaroo.
Okay.
Basically, it was 5-a-side football, small pitches, no substitutes. These rolled on, rolled off. Every kid got the same amount of time. There was lots of supportive coaching for the kids. All the things we felt were right as pros. All the things we found that the academic research showed that kids want to have fun. You get them to have fun. So all those things. I lost the battle. I lost the battle to the political aspect of the game. Now, anyone that tells you that football and politics don't mix is a dreamer, is naive. There is politics in every sport, politics in football, it's politics at every level. And it depends on the definition of politics, of course, but every dressing room has politics. No, I sit there, you don't, you sit in the back over there because you're new. There's all sorts of political structures go on in life and in football. And I tried to get this system through, and one of the biggest states, New South Wales it was called, they would not let this system apply. They wanted to keep medals, championships, 11v11s on full programs. It was crazy, but they won because they had the votes. So again, I had to learn how to get around the system and put long-term problems in. In youth, you can be long-term. You can aim to say, we will do this in 5 years' time.
Right.
Because you might have that time period. You can't do that at the top level, because at the top level, long-term is next week. Development is, because basically winning next week is long-term, and getting a development is winning by a bigger score next week. But at youth level, you can say, okay, let's put in, we'll do this by year 1. We'll make it better by year 2. We'll kick on and we'll go on to year 5. And will we reach our goal? And the good thing is, if you've got the right people on long-term contracts, you can do that. And that's where your technical directors, your youth directors, they should be on long-term contracts so they can see their work through. You're not going to get that at the top level, because you're only as good as your next game. So you might get a long contract, and the good thing is you might get paid out. I mean, I'll be honest, one of the best days of my life was when I got sacked at one club. I got an 18-month payout. Oh, fantastic. But though sometimes in Asia, you've got to fight for that payout, believe me. It's not always like, if you get paid out in England, you get paid out. I'm sure the same in the USA. But in Asia, sometimes you have to battle. But in this case, I didn't battle. I got the money. So I had a great time.
Yeah, even if it says it on the contract, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be carried out, right? So,
I mean, there's all sorts of contracts as well. There's the official contract, there's the under the table contract, and you learn as you go along that you can only argue the official contract, and often they'll say to you, "Look, this is the official contract," and it will be for tax reasons. They'll say, "But we'll pay you this under the table so that you don't pay tax," which immediately appeals to you. But then again, if something goes wrong, that under the table contract no longer exists.
Yeah.
You can only get back what you officially got paid. So it's a gamble, but that's the real world of coaching. Welcome to coaching in I'll say Asia. I actually spent a few months in the USA in 1975. But that was purely youth coaching on the camp system. I went to Lake Tariato in New York with Camp America. That's probably before you were born, actually. so it was
probably, yeah, but not too far away. Yeah. So it seems you've been in kind of all different.
Yeah. So basically, I think youth development deserves good people with good values, high standards. I'd use the word ethical people as well, doing the right, correct values, and on long-term contracts. It would be nice to say the same thing about the highest level, but that's not going to happen. You have to accept what it is, adapt to what it is, and do your best.
And then I have a question too, because I know you've coached top teams on the club side, right?
Yeah.
But then also at the national team level. So I imagine that role is different, right? And although there is still the pressure to win and perform, you have a much different type of role. You have different cycles. It's not like a match every week necessarily. So how did that role look like? When you're the head coach of Laos, for example,
Yeah.
or the women's program in Vietnam. How is it different when you're a national team coach versus
Well,
club?
you miss that as a national coach. In many ways, it's a bit easier because you do miss the day-to-day involvement with your players, or you get to know them as people first, because what you're doing is watching them almost from the outside as a national coach, and then you bring them in excuse me, for a short period of time, and you don't always get to know them right away, but it's a trade-off, really. That's what you have to do. There's less pressure in many ways as a national coach. I mean, as Lao national coach, we played Korea. We were not going to win. I knew that.
Mm-hmm.
The players knew that. Everyone knew it. So that was okay. So the only pressure was, can we keep it down to a low score? Which we did. So there are different pressures. But in some cases, like in Vietnam, when you're a national team coach, and Thailand, you have the whole world on your shoulders. The nation wants you to win. The media. Now, in some countries, the media is irrelevant. I'll be fair. Laos, it wasn't that powerful because the government controlled the media. So that was fine. In Thailand, the media were ruthless. They would tell lies, and that you have to learn that believe me, you get lies told in the media. I've had to explain to my mother that is not true. I did not do that. This is what happened. And she tried to learn, things like this. So the media are powerful. And also you have to learn about now, people of your age, you've got to learn about social media, because that can be brutal. That can be downright lies. That can be just fictitious. Imagine I had a case of where I was with one club, and this bloke on Facebook, because Facebook was very, very big in Malaysia, and he kept abusing us and saying our tactics were wrong, and it was really getting, our players weren't fit. One of my players turned out to be an IT specialist, and he traced where this idiot was writing from. And the lads went round to see him, shall we say. This is professional players, got so fed up. And it turned out this bloke who was saying you're not fit was about 200 kilos.
It's always like that, right?
And another time, my tactics were being abused and all sorts. And it was getting to my committee was starting to believe this guy on the Facebook. Again, one of the lads found out who it was. It turned out the expert was 14. And he wasn't only abusing me, he was happened to be abusing Jose Mourinho as well, and stuff like that. But I mean,
so you're in good company, right?
Yeah, and you get clowns. I had one bloke, again, saying I was the worst coach since Del Bosque, who was then Spain's national coach. So I said, I actually wrote back. I said, well, what makes you think I'm the worst coach in Del Bosque? I said, I actually think he's a great coach. Real Madrid, Spain. He said, yeah, but you're as stupid as him because he didn't pick Messi for Spain. And I thought, there's no hope. I'm dealing with someone here who has got no hope of having any argument with that type of mentality that, that Messi is cannot play for Spain, you idiots. So that's what you deal with. But you've got to learn to manage that now. And there's a good phrase I've learned that you have to learn as well to manage upwards, because somewhere along the line, someone is your boss, someone is employing you. It might be a president, it might be an owner, it might be a director of football, it might be in some cases the government. In Malaysia, it was the government. So you have to learn how to handle those people up there. I've made mistakes. Well, believe me, I've made mistakes, but other places that I've adapted and I've learned. And some cases I've been lucky. I mean, the Malaysian aspect, I was at a team called Perak, and we were paid for and owned by one particular form of government. For 2.5 years, it was magnificent. They paid us. a new government came in, stopped paying the players. So I then went to meet the Prime Minister of the state, and I said, "What are you doing? You can't not pay people." He said, "Oh, they should be playing for the honour of the state." And I said, "Look, are you the Prime Minister for the honour?" I knew I'd gone by then. So and that was it. I'd gone within the next few months. So, but at least some of the players got paid in the end. But we had to make a massive fuss about it. I mean, and I've met all sorts of people. I've met prime ministers, I've met kings, sultans, sultanas. Loads and loads of people like that. I've even met mafia, real mafia, and I'll be honest, they were some of the nicest guys in the world. And they're the most intelligent guys I've met with the mafia guys. And in one country we met a killer. He was a killer for hire, and he said to us, "If I had a problem, just let me know. It'll cost you $200 to get rid of your problem." And I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. So because again, football attracts certain type of people, and they attracted some of the because football gives you status, it gives you kudos, it gives you power. Some of the mafia loved it, and they were good. To me, they were good, and even now, I'll still say they're good no matter what.
Absolutely, you want to be, friends with the right people, not too close, but have good relations. And I think that's part of the games that brings people together, especially at the highest levels, like you said, the status that it confers on people, and the glory you can have. And if we talk about like Asian football in general, it's a area of the world that probably in comparison with other continents and regions hasn't had a ton of success on a world level. Obviously, you're seeing some of that changing. Like Japan, the women performed very well at the Women's World Cup recently. The men as well, with getting out of their group. Now we're seeing in the other area of like the AFC, of the Asian Football Confederation, is Saudi Arabia becoming a massive player, obviously, and attracting players like Ronaldo and Neymar, right, and all these other stars that are going. So, what do you think that Asia needs to kind of? And I know it's a hard question because it's a massive continent as well, and you're talking about so many different cultures and things too. But what does Asian football kind of have to offer to the world, do you think?
Well, it has to offer passion. That's the first thing, because in most Asian countries, not all, but most, there's football and there's daylight. You might have badminton a bit lower, something like that.
Yeah.
You get the exceptions, like the Philippines, where basketball is more important.
Cricket in India, right?
Yeah. Mainly due to colonial influences. You have the USA in Philippines, etc. But the big boys, Japan, Korea, Saudi, it's football first. And if you want a model to follow, I would follow Japan, because they are doing everything right in terms of development. They do think long term. And what's happening now, they were planning in 1990. That's the type of mentality. And they are the best operators, I think, in world football. And eventually they will. I mean, what Saudi is doing is different. It's basically top heavy. It's financially driven. But if you've got it, why not do it? But all those things that happen, it's going to be great for the game because you've got the passion. The biggest problem within Asia is corruption. Now, I'm not saying Europe isn't corrupt, because believe me, there are massive corruption problems there in Italy, in Croatia, but at much of the levels in Asia, there is corruption, and that might be corruption in administration. That's one factor, and also match fixing, which is a massive problem. I mean, things like corruption in one country. I'll be honest, Vietnam. I've worked there. In Vietnam, often the coach won't pick a player or sign a player unless he gets kicked back from the player or the agent.
He wants a cut of their salary or something.
Or it's the manager that does that. Now, what that means is they're getting poor level foreigners coming in, which is not good for the game. I mean, I'll be honest, when I was in Malaysia, I had an agent come up to me, and he come to me and said, "Right, we agreed for the player, we agreed the salary, all sorted out, no problem." And he says, "Right, he said, I want 20,000 for me." I said, "Get stuff. I've done, the player pays you. That's the deal, etc., etc." Oh no, he said, don't worry, coach. I'll give 50% of that back to you. So I said, you're asking me to steal 10,000 off my club. He said, yeah.
Mhm.
He says, they all do it. He said, the last coach before me did it, apparently. I said, well, I'm not doing it, because he did. I don't know, maybe that's why I'm not a multi-millionaire, but I didn't do it. I had certain things. That's when my bamboo swayed to an extent. I wouldn't do that. So that's what happens. And one of my foreigners, when I signed on for this team, said to me, how much do I pay you, coach? I said, you score goals. He said, but the last coach, because he was on appearance money, made him pay him money every time he made an appearance. I said, no, it doesn't work that way anymore. And that's why I refused to pay players goal bonuses. And I said, I said to my striker, if I gave you a goal bonus, you wouldn't ever pass a ball. I know you. You will just want to score goals. You'll shoot from everywhere. You'll never lay a pass off to someone else. And because that's the nature. I mean, and so where you got to look again culturally. If you have a lot of players who come from Africa, they've been brought up in poverty, a poverty that I cannot imagine, I cannot dream of, and they're sending money back to feed not only a family, an extended family, and that extended family would be like the whole village. And one of my players, very, very articulate young fella from Burkina Faso, trained as a doctor, spoke 5 languages, and he explained to me a lot about the culture of some of the African players who are just purely driven for money because they have no choice, because they have so many years to make it, and they have to spend that money back building up their life plan, building up their family, looking after their home, because if they don't, that's it. It's literally, and in some cases, which is terrible, that these players have borrowed money to come to Asia.
Right.
Again, the worst agents I've found are the people who are screwing their own players. So you'll have lads from Nigeria, Cameroon, and they're getting absolutely ripped off by agents from those countries who are taking money off them, making them pay their own airfare, dumping them in Asia, and literally, if they don't make it, leaving them there. I mean, that's something that's got to be sorted out with FIFA. It's a moral issue, that one. I've had lads who come to me for trials who were nowhere near good enough to play professional football, but the agent just said, "I will make you a star. Give me $5,000." The bloke's borrowed $5,000. The lad's come. He's hopeless. I've got to say, sorry, son, I can't give you a contract. He's stuck in a country with no airfare back. That's what goes on at some levels. It's not all like Neymar, Ronaldo.
Exactly.
That's
very much the exception.
That's the top 1%. The bottom percent, where you're playing for your mortgage, it's very different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've heard that too. I mean, when I was living in Bangkok, one of the teachers I worked with was from Nigeria. And he's like, he had went home over a school break back to Nigeria, was coming back. And he's like, yeah, there's a few guys on the flight, and they said they're coming over to play football. And he's like, every time I come back from home and I fly back to Thailand, it's the same case. And he's like, I just tell him I really hope it's a legitimate situation, because we hear those horror stories and then you're just stranded, and it's a shame. But again, it's like you said, it's the dream that football offers. And then the reality, the need, like you're saying, financially, the players have to support a family, extended family. It's like that is worth the risk, and I agree there. Unfortunately, the world is so huge. There's so many leagues in different countries, and it's great on one hand because there's opportunity, but then on the negative side, it's very difficult to regulate and keep track of all those, horrible business practices. And then hopefully there's a way to move forward that. I'm curious too, because, you're just saying you're players from Burkina Faso or Nigeria, and then you're an Englishman in Malaysia or in India or Vietnam. And so the game definitely brings people from all over the world together. When you go into a new team, right, or you've been with them for a bit, does the dressing room, are there similarities in terms of how players relate, or does that really take work sometimes to get them to connect? Because I always wonder, and I'm sure our listeners too, if you got 7 different native language speakers and 10 different countries and different cultures represented, how do you take people from such different places and kind of mold them into one unit?
Yeah, there can be difficulties. There can be differences. the first thing I try to do anywhere I go is learn the language. I know I'm not going to be fluent. I know the older I get, the more difficult it becomes. I can speak Vietnamese and Malaysian because I can read it, but you, having worked in Thailand, will know that you cannot read Thai.
Yeah, the script is challenging.
Unless you've been born there, you're not going to be able to read it. Same as Arabic. I speak reasonable Arabic, but I can't. I'm illiterate. So that's the first thing. Learn the language. Matter of respect. Learn to say hello, thank you. Just be polite. Bits and bits and bits, and also learn to coach the main things in Arabic, in that language. It helps. It also helps as well that they won't speak in front of you. They think you know their language. They won't say bad things in the dressing room. So you suddenly cut down some of the, or you get to learn. There's one case I was walking off the pitch in Malaysia, and an Englishman came off the half time and said, "You're going to win 2-0, coach." I said, "How do you know?" He says, "Because they don't think I can speak Malay, but I can. And the game's going to be fixed. You're going to win 2-0. And it was. We scored in the 84th and the 89th minutes. They were never going to score. We didn't have time to score 3. The game was fixed for 2-0. So that's where the language helped him. So that's the first thing. But again, you have to accept different things like Thailand. Thailand is renowned for, you see, Bangkok, all those sex places you go to. You go into a dressing room in Bangkok, it's an extremely conservative place. The players will not get undressed in front of each other. They put towels around their waist. They pull their pants down. They'll put their shorts on underneath a towel. They will not walk around in front of each other without clothes on. They will wear shorts in the shower. So, which you wouldn't expect in Bangkok when you see the media image of Bangkok.
Right.
And you have to accept that in Malaysia, the players pray before they go out. The last thing they do is I would go through what we had to do. Then the captain would call them together, and he would then, in a circle, they would pray. Now, in this Malaysian team I had in Perak, we would have had 6 religions, but all they did was they bowed their head. The Muslims, who had about 5 or 6 players, they said their prayer. You could say your own prayer if you wanted to, or you could say, in my case, say no prayer. That was your choice. So you learned that it was, how to adapt. I was in a club in Kelantan where it was all Muslims, where even the foreign players who were bought were Muslims as well. So they all prayed together. And we had a prayer room at the side of the dressing room and things like this. So you're not going to beat that. And there's no reason to beat that. It's not winning that. That's their life. That's their culture. You have to adapt into that culture and get the best out of it. If I tried to stop people praying, it's madness. It would be immoral. So you adapt to that. And then while I was there in Kelantan, I used to go to this restaurant called Mazitas, and the boss there, she would teach me all about the cultural things I had to learn. I learned things like, if you meet a female, don't put your hand out to shake hands, because she might not be able to do it, and she'll be embarrassed. If she puts her hand out, you can shake. In Thailand, don't pat kids on the head. Don't show the soles of your feet to somebody. You learn those little things, and it goes a long way to making your job a lot easier.
Yeah, I think, like you're saying, just showing respect. You're new, you're a stranger in their country. They're not going to change, and as a guest, you should be respectful of that, right? And you touched on something there with the restaurant, which I'm really curious about here, and it's always a fun thing to chat about with someone like yourself who's lived in so many different places. So we got to hear it here. Where's the best food in your opinion? You can have a first, second, third place or as many levels you need, but there's a lot of good ones to pick from between Vietnam, Malaysia, I've heard is a fantastic. Thailand, obviously, is one of my favorites. India, you've got a lot of options there.
Well, most of the Indian lads will tell you that the Indian food in England is better than the Indian food in India.
Really?
That's what the Indian boys tell me. But my favorite was this Mazitas restaurant. She used to have things like fitness salads. And roti. I love the roti. I like spicy food, but I thought I liked spicy food till I went to Thailand, and that's where it nearly blew my head off. So and I mean, I wrote I write for a few magazines, and one of the things I put about in the role of being the foreigner is to actually be careful what you eat, because when I went to India for the first time, I discovered that what they call it Delhi belly,
Right.
and I
Yeah.
thought it was funny. It wasn't funny. I spent the night in the bathroom on a blanket with a pillow because I couldn't risk going in that far away from the toilet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was in agony. I mean, the pain was like a knife going in my stomach. So you learn. So literally, I couldn't work the next day. I learned you have to be careful what you eat. Don't eat something new the night before a game, because you might be able to do your job the next day.
The way that we generally end each episode here is by completing the sentence that we offer to all our guests. So, and I know it's a simple one, but a tough one. So Coach Darby, could you complete the sentence? Because football. ...
Because football, I've been lucky enough to wake up every morning thinking, "Oh, I'm looking forward to going to work." Because football has given me what I think a great life. Because football has made me financially comfortable. I'll be honest. Not multimillionaire. Well, I am in dong, Vietnamese dong, but not in US dollars. But because football has given me so many happy times and made me meet so many great people.
Fantastic, Coach. I'm sure the legacy you've left all across the world has been definitely felt and made an impact on so many. So we thank you for your contributions and look forward to seeing what the next step is for you.
Thank you.
And so we'll be including some links for your LinkedIn, some of your other stories here, so everybody can learn more about you. But thank you so much for joining us, and everyone watching and listening. Thank you for joining for another fantastic episode of Because Football. We'll see you on the next one.